You're listening to episode 94 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Natalie K. Douglas about how to reframe your language for better healing. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, and our guest today is someone who I've actually known for a while through the internet, and because she lives internationally, we've never actually met. But today was the first time we had an opportunity to actually have a conversation, which was amazing. And I really loved the conversation that we had. It was definitely a little bit different than the conversations we often have in general about health, but certainly not unusual for this podcast, because if you guys have been listening for any length of time, you know that I love to go off on tangents and talk about random things that maybe seem a little disconnected from the topic, but actually are very much connected to the topic when we zoom out a little bit. So that's definitely the way our conversation went today. I really enjoyed it, and I think you will too. So today's guest is Natalie K. Douglas, a holistic dietitian and nutritionist, speaker, and host of the Holistic Nutritionist podcast. Through her successful online programs, Thyroid Rescue and Gut Rescue, and in her fully booked clinical practice, Natalie helps women experiencing thyroid, gut, and hormonal issues reclaim their energy, transform their digestive health, and balance their hormones so they can live happy, healthy, and empowered lives. Natalie has been a featured expert in Australian women's health, men's health, the House of Wellness, I Quit Sugar, and across various online media. Her results-focused holistic approach combines the power of functional testing, real food, smart supplementation, movement, stress and sleep management, and emotional and spiritual well-being. Natalie has completed further study in naturopathy and functional medicine and is also a certified yoga teacher and fitness instructor. You can learn more on her website, nataliekdouglas.com, and on Instagram at natalie.k.douglas. So I loved this conversation with Natalie. We definitely got into some of the woo around mindset and around the power of our thoughts and beliefs and how that all affects our healing journey. So I hope that you'll enjoy this. So without further ado, here is Natalie K. Douglas. All right, everybody. Well, I am so excited to have with me on the show today, Natalie Douglas. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Natalie.
Thank you. It's really exciting to be here.
Now that I think about it, this is maybe the first time you and I have actually ever spoke, but I feel like I've been connected with you online for a while. Does that sound accurate to you?
It really does sound accurate to me. I feel like I've actually watched your business evolve since the very beginning, right back when, what was it, what were you called in the very beginning?
Oh gosh, our original podcast that we started in 2013. Well, first it was Ask the RDs, and then we changed it to the Ancestral RDs with Kelsey, Kenny, and myself.
Yep. So I have been on your radar since way back then, because it was so hard as a dietitian in Australia to find any other people that were on a similar page as far as whole food eating way back then, when paleo was just there was on no one's radar, or eating whole foods or anything like that. So it was really good to find someone that was a dietitian and still speaking about that.
Well, what's ironic is I was actually first introduced to the whole paleo ancestral health concept when I was living in Australia, there was this cafe in Bondi Junction, actually. So like the mall area. I don't know if you've been to
Yes,
that
I
particular.
actually think I know where you're talking about.
Do you know what shop I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I can't remember what the actual name of it was, but I can see it in my mind because I went there. I was drawn there as well.
And there's this guy named Pete. I don't know if he's still there, but he was the owner and he wore like the Vibram, like barefoot shoes. And they had these like really interesting gluten-free millet breads and they sold raw milk. And it was just like total.
Such rebels.
Yeah, it was like a total crunchy hippie cafe in Bondi Junction. And that was in 2009. And that was where I first started getting introduced to the whole like paleo concept. So it's funny because I always thought Australia was ahead of the United States. So maybe we've had a different experience in our own countries.
Yeah, totally.
But anyway, so for the listeners who don't know you and want to get to know you, just if you could just tell us your story. How did you get interested in women's health, thyroid health, nutrition, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, so as with many people who are in this industry, it certainly came from my own struggles. So I'll try and put it into a nutshell. But basically, I grew up with an eating disorder most of my life. So from when I was about 12 and a half to maybe 22, it's hard. As many people listening will know, it's not something that just ends. It's just kind of fades out or you gradually heal. So huge amount of time. And in that time, I was very obsessed with food, as most people with an eating disorder are. And so I was really drawn to understand it more, probably so that I could control it more. And then as I was going through my university degree as a dietitian, I actually got really sick. And there was a whole bunch of things that happened to me. Like I lost my period for like maybe 8 years or more. I got put on hormone replacement therapy. I had osteoporosis. I had parasites. Then, as I was going through more of a healing journey, I ended up with a thyroid issue and putting on lots of weight. There were all these different things. And of course, a lot of associated anxiety and a few bouts of depression just in going through such a huge amount of changes, and even hormonally, just a lot of changes. So it was really that I guess started my journey into more of a functional medicine, holistic space, because when I looked to, at that time, conventional medicine to help me, particularly it started with the gut issues and the hormone issues, I was just met with no answers and I'd try what they were suggesting and it just didn't make sense. I wasn't getting any better. And then I ended up in the hands of a naturopath at the time, actually. And that just really changed the course of my health and then the course of my passion from then on in, really. So that's my story in a nutshell.
I was impressed. That actually is a pretty small nutshell that you were able to squeeze all of that into. And how long ago was that was all happening? Because I feel like I always imagine people to be young, especially when they're entrepreneurs. I feel like everybody's so energetic and everything. But how long ago was all of that happening for you?
So I'm 30 this year. So that was, about 7 years ago now. Like it kind of was a thing that happened over a number of years. So towards the tail end of it, I wasn't as sick, but I was still certainly not completely well. But a lot, like the real major things in terms of the parasites, and I actually had I woke up one day and I couldn't walk more than about 10 meters without a lot of pain. And it was really sudden. So I went from exercising like 7 days a week, twice a day, which is far too much, but that was just part of my eating disorder and over-exercising, to I woke up and I couldn't walk more than 10 or so meters without neck pain that was started to go down my back. And I went to physios, I went to chiros, osteos, I went to a spinal surgeon. I had so many investigations done and no one could find anything structurally wrong. And the only thing that gave it any relief was a bit of acupuncture, but the pain would always come back. And then it wasn't until I actually got put on hormone replacement therapy, which, not the wisest solution. There were probably other things I could have done beforehand, but that was just where I was at that point, and antidepressants for a short period of time, that the pain started to go away. So that happened probably when I was about probably at 19, 20, 21, when I was doing my uni degree, which was really hard. And I think part of the struggle was very much that I had formed most of my identity on, being the fit one, being the healthy one. And I'm using quotation marks for anyone listening because I obviously was not healthy. And they were really formative years, So I thought, well, people value me because this is who I am. And then when that was literally just taken away from me, I could no longer do any of that stuff. I was left feeling really, really lost and with not very many tools at that point in time to use, because exercise was my tool to calm my anxiety. So it was a huge journey and such a blessing in disguise, because I don't think that I'd be anywhere near as self-loving and resilient and also where I'm at in my career if I hadn't gone through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's a sadly common origin story for a lot of people in our field, which it makes sense because I feel like you get passionate about helping people with stuff that you dealt with, right? It's very common to have that experience where you went through a serious challenge and then on the other side of it, you're like, now I can help people with that. So do you find yourself using a lot of the strategies and tools that now that you have for yourself, do you find them helpful when you're working with clients to help them with their health journeys?
Yeah, I really do. And I think part of it is just being able to really use words that resonate with people and meet them where they're at. Because I think sometimes, or a lot of the time, people with chronic health issues feel so alone and so misunderstood because, they're often not super visible. It's not like someone's arm is being cut off and you can be like, wow, that person doesn't have an arm. That must be really hard for you. It's such a internal battle. And I think that when it goes on for a long time, and people have, been filtered through the medical system and been passed from practitioner to practitioner and invalidated constantly, they often start to question their own connection with their body. Is it in my head? Can I just not cope? Am I a burden because I constantly feel tired or I've got these different issues? So I certainly think from an emotional perspective, being able to just connect really deeply with people's stories and understand what little things end up coming up and how they might be feeling. I think there's power in people just being seen and heard for the first time, sometimes ever. And then I certainly think that a lot of the practical tools, like different therapy modalities, I think also mindfulness, meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's prayer for people, whether it is kinesiology, I just kind of lay it all out on the table. And I've done a lot of those things myself. And I just encourage people to explore, because I think we all resonate with different types of, support at different times in our journey. So I think it's almost giving people permission to test the waters and know that they can change their mind at any point in time. And if one strategy doesn't work, then there are so many more available out there to try.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you're passionate about helping women believe that their body is not broken and reframing their language around that concept. So can you talk a little bit about how women show up when they do feel like their body is broken when they're working with you?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the time it comes down to this self-sabotage, like as in they kind of have a lack of self-trust, and it's kind of like they make these plans to implement changes, and sometimes they'll make a long list of things they have to do in order to succeed, and then the list is too big and they quote unquote fail. And then it's almost like they've said they're going to do something and don't follow through with it, which undermines their self-trust, because I think we build trust in ourselves and in others when we're true to our word. And so I think like that's part of it. And then the other part of it is just a lot of stories around, oh yeah, my body doesn't work like so-and-so's, or, well, I've tried everything and nothing works, or like really that desperate feeling of this does not make sense. When I look around and compare myself to all these other people, my body doesn't work in the same way that theirs does. Or looking backwards, and I think this is something that happens a lot as well, is, well, when I tried to, lose weight that time, it worked and now it doesn't. Or when I tried to improve my thyroid function in the past, it worked and now it won't budge. So I think it's a lot in their language that they use, and a lot of language around like self-doubt and comparison.
Mm-hmm. And with the language itself, so a lot of what we talk about on the show is beliefs, and even to the point of like identity. You were mentioning a few minutes ago that one of your challenges through your eating disorder was having that identity as the fit person. And I would imagine that when people are going through these challenging health experiences where they've been feeling poorly for a while, they're not really getting believed by their doctors or their family, that kind of thing. I would imagine that a lot of their identity starts to get shaped as an ill person, right? Like, oh, my body is broken. I'm chronically ill. Like they take it on as an identity. How do you see that affecting the actual physical outcomes that somebody can get, especially with some of the issues you deal with your clients, like thyroid issues?
Yeah, I think it's hugely limiting because, as you know, we like what's familiar because it's safe, even if it doesn't serve us. And I think for a lot of people with chronic health issues, absolutely. Like you even ask someone and they'll say, oh, I have Hashimoto's, for example, I have a thyroid issue. And what I try and get them to do is switch the language into like, I'm experiencing an imbalance in so and so at the moment, as opposed to identifying it and using I am statements, because I absolutely do think that that happens. And I was just having a conversation with a client the other day who, not a thyroid patient, but someone who has been chronically unwell with mold illness and a whole bunch of other things for the last 5 years. And there was just this fear of like, who am I when I don't have my illness as quote unquote an excuse is what she used in her words. Like, I'm fearful of showing up in life because I've just retreated for so long. And I think it's, so understandable when that's all you've known for a really long time. And I also think that what can happen for some people, especially if it's been chronic issues, is the fear of going backwards. So they start to feel a little bit better. And then there's this constant waiting to be hit backwards again instead of just like a gratitude and a presence to it. So I think it's a lot around that as well, and dealing with traumas and, really starting to break up with those I am statements when it comes to any kind of condition or illness that they've been labeled with, and just using more words of I'm experiencing X, Y, or Z. And then also really like empowering language around choice. I think that what can happen a lot of the time when women in particular who feel like they've just tried everything, there's this language around, oh, I can't have that, I can't do this, I must do this. And I just try and get them to reframe that to I choose, and taking ownership of what they're doing, because I think that in that it feels more empowered. Like, it carries a different energy in someone's body. It carries an energy of expansion and ownership, as opposed to kind of like restriction and, living in a little box, which is how can someone grow and expand if they feel confined?
Mm-hmm. And I know that comes up a lot, especially in diet, any sort of healing diet or, dietary strategies for different health conditions. And I feel like there's this fine line between making changes that can be helpful, right? Like we know that there's certain changes that really do make an impact on people's health, especially with thyroid issues. But then if they start to get into that like black and white thinking, or, oh, I can't have this, or, I shouldn't do this, that kind of stuff, I can imagine that can really create a disordered relationship with food. Is that something that you've seen before?
Yeah, for sure. I think it happens a lot when, I personally use something similar to an autoimmune paleo protocol for a lot of my Hashimoto's or Graves' disease patients, because it does work really well. However, there is that real thing that happens where people just get stuck in it and like fearful of reintroducing anything or fearful of foods. And I think the longer I use it, the more I realize how important it is to use the words like, we're doing this as an experiment, as like a reset, but this is not the forever version of how you should eat long-term to manage your condition. Because I think that, food is so much more than just food. It is part of joy. It's part of socializing. It also has cultural relevance for a lot of people as well. So I think it's about being able to step back and look at the whole picture for people. But I certainly see that come along a lot. And I think it's also about teaching people to separate their choices from their worth. like you're making a choice to consume this, but it has nothing to do with whether you're being good or bad or right or wrong. It's literally just a choice that you're making, and you make choices all day, every day.
Yeah, this is interesting. It's a concept that I've been hearing a lot in the like business world, and I think it applies so much to this situation where it's not about right or wrong, good or bad, right? Like I feel like there's so much of this morality brought in, and people, like you said, they wrap up their identity in, did I make the right choice? Did I do the best thing, and that kind of stuff. And it's so interesting because, again, it's so universal. I feel like it doesn't matter if we're talking about food or business or anything in between. But something that I've been hearing a lot is this concept of saying, is that effective? Like, is it an effective choice or is it ineffective? And so if we can actually look at it, like you were saying, as a temporary experiment to see, is this effective on the result that you're looking for? So I'm imagining, with thyroid issues, it's the actual lab work, how they feel, like their energy, that kind of thing. And it can really separate the actions and the food choices from there being some kind of like self-worth attached to it. So it's just interesting because it's like, I feel like that's just a pattern of behavior that so many of us get into where it's like, oh, I want to do the right thing. I want to be good. I want to like, have that sense of I'm a good person because I'm doing the right thing. But it's actually not helpful when we think about it that way.
Yeah, so like could not agree more. And I think it's not surprising considering we're grown up being like, oh, you're a good girl or you're a good boy or you're a bad boy. Like it's just interwoven in culture, at least in my experience as well. So I really think it is about just trying to constantly bring awareness to people's language and how they speak to themselves. Because I think that, a lot of people, they've spoken to themselves so poorly for so many years, and they can identify that and they can be like, oh yeah, like that's true. I've always been a bit like that. And I think just bringing into their awareness that, well, if you've done that for so many years and here you are, on the flip side, you can also change that at any point in time. And, in a year's time or however many years' time, you're going to be here saying completely different things in your head. And I know that to be true because I've done that for myself with recovering from an eating disorder. I once thought that once you had an eating disorder, you would always have some kind of eating disorder or some kind of thoughts there that still, linger. And I truly don't think that's the case anymore, at least not in my experience. So I think it's about recognizing that there's so much power in our language and in our words, and that creates our actions and creates the energy around our actions as well. So it's kind of like this interest and curiosity instead of judgment.
And I always thought that was so odd in the eating disorder world where they do tell people that, oh, once you've had one, you'll always have it. Like, I understand why, because in some ways you're kind of saying, hey, like, don't feel like, oh, I'm recovered. That means I can go start dieting and over-exercising again, But on the other hand, telling someone that they're always going to have an issue, I mean, does that really lead people to feel like it's something that they can actually truly overcome? Or are they just kind of like accepting, oh, this means I'll always be this way? And it is kind of a fine line because you don't want people to not take it seriously, but then you also don't want people to think there's no hope for them in recovery.
Totally. Yeah. And I have absolutely had the same thoughts. And it is a really difficult thing because also people can, in my experience, people can get quite defensive if I share that. If I say I actually don't think that once you have an eating disorder, you always have an eating disorder. And sometimes people hold so tightly onto that too, and I just find that really interesting. I don't have an answer to it, but I find that so interesting that can be really triggering for people, and they hold on to that being almost like a layer they're not willing to let go of.
Yeah, I wonder, maybe there's other conditions that we do that with. Maybe it's more the mental health conditions, but I'm just like, what other health issue do we say, once you have that, you'll always have it? And it doesn't matter how much better you get, you always have it. Like, it's kind of odd to me.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And I think it's, the more I think about like self-responsibility and taking control of your choices, the more I feel like that can be scary for people. And also I feel that it can be just so empowering too, because a lot of us, or I should speak from I feel like in my past, I've certainly latched onto that and very much fallen into like a victim mentality and tried to latch on to certain diagnosis and played within that container. Whereas now these days, I just try my best to use really empowering language, because I do think that it makes a difference. It just makes life feel freer. And that's what a lot of the time people are scared of, but also craving at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like there is that balance between, that concept of making everything your fault, right? Like if you get an illness, it's like, well, it's your fault, right? So, I don't think either of us are suggesting that anyone should say, oh, the reason you're sick is because you're not doing everything possible to not be sick. Like obviously we know people, we have mutual friends that, did everything possible and did not heal from certain illnesses. So it's one of these situations where we have to be able to balance taking responsibility for what you can take responsibility for and believing that healing is possible, because otherwise, if it's not possible, why would people even bother trying, right? Like it makes sense that people would give up on things if they didn't think that there was a point. And also not creating this sense of, well, if you didn't get better, it's because you didn't do enough. And I do think, there is that dark side of the mindset shifts that can happen. And so it's such an interesting kind of like gray area to fall into, because I do feel like either end of the extreme, either saying, this is how you are and this is how it'll always be and there's no hope, or saying, oh, if you just try harder, if you just do more, if you just like believe enough, like the outcome will change. I don't think either end of the extreme is true. And so finding that middle ground is not easy, but it's definitely, I think, more realistic and accurate to the way that the body actually responds to mindset and, actions that we take.
Yeah, totally. I think there's power in surrender as well. And I think that's where, believing in something bigger than you really helps. And whether that is God for some people, whether that's the universe for other people, it doesn't matter what it is. But I think when you can cultivate some kind of connection with something that is bigger than yourself, you can kind of do everything that you feel like is in your control and then surrender to trusting that everything is playing out is exactly as it's supposed to, even if it doesn't make sense, which is hard, like really hard, especially when really things happen. It's incredibly easy, like much easier said than done. But I also feel like the people who take that approach, it's not easy, but it is easier to navigate through.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, but this just makes me think of some people in my life that almost go too far in the direction of, well, whatever is meant to happen is going to happen. So if they're dealing with like a health issue that, you and I would know, hey, if you just make some not so big changes, like some little changes with stuff, it actually could improve. So again, it's that balance, because it's like, most of my family and friends and everything are Christian. And even though not all my friends would say this, we do have some friends and family members that really are very much like, well, God's going to handle it, right? Like if I'm meant to get better, God will do it. I'm like, yeah, but he also gave you access to information and tools and support and like things that are like good for your body, like exercise and eating vegetables and that kind of thing. So it's just, I do think we get so polarized in our world about everything. And I feel like you're either on the spectrum of, well, it's just the way it is and I'm not going to, try to do anything about it. Or, a lot of the people that we probably have interacted with, or maybe even felt like this was how we were back in the day, 10 years ago, that you're almost on the other end of the spectrum where it's like, I have to do everything perfect or nothing's going to work. And again, it's this like, yeah, there's a nice middle ground to get into where you can take responsibility for the actions and the thoughts and beliefs that you're allowing to be cultivated, but also not feeling like, oh, if you take one wrong step, it's going to be your fault if you don't get better.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more. And humans are just interesting because often it's not sexy to sit in the middle, but that's usually where the magic is, because health, healing, everything is just so multifaceted. And, it's, if you're in either extreme, you miss that, you miss something.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I know that one of the things you do in your business is running group programs. And I would love to talk a little bit about why you have group programs. I know, from a business perspective, a lot of the clients I work with to grow their business want to have group programs because it allows them to help more people with their time. They're no longer trading time for dollars, which is, the business motivation for creating a group. But I know that you have a different perspective on why group programs that has more to do with the healing journey. So can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy on group programs?
Yeah, I can. And I firstly totally agree with all that from a business perspective as well. That's certainly true for me. However, what I also find with group programs, especially when we're dealing with something that is more of like a chronic issue or people feel alone in it. So for me, I have two programs. One is thyroid rescue and one is gut rescue. So most people who have thyroid issues or gut issues didn't just get them in the last month. Most of them have been suffering for years and years. And I think it's kind of like bringing a group of people together who are experiencing somewhat similar things. There's so many themes that pop up in how they feel. And when people can see themselves in others, they are able to almost like give support and advice that gets mirrored back to them. And when you can see yourself in someone and see them struggling and use words of kindness, I try and bring their awareness to that. And it almost is like this snowball effect of starting to like lift each other up. And I think it's so powerful having any type of community when you bring them together. I just think people lift people up. And I try to create, I think it can go the opposite direction though. And if anyone has ever been in some of those thyroid Facebook groups online, like, wow, like there's a lot of negativity and stuff in there. And, that really breaks my heart because I don't think it has to be that way. But what I try to do in my programs and in the support groups is really like allow people to share their struggles, of course, and encourage that sharing, but also encourage being self-responsible and empowering each other and lifting each other up and looking for solutions, because I think that what can sometimes happen is people get stuck in that victim mindset, and that doesn't help. And, energy follows energy. So if that starts to collectively happen as a group, people spiral down. Whereas if we can keep it spiraling up, I think it makes a difference because, they can get rid of this story that they've often told themselves for so long that, oh, well, Janet at the gym, like she does this and it just worked for her. And, my husband can, diet for 2 days and lose all his excess weight or whatever it is. So I think it just creates a sense of I'm not alone, that I can do this, and getting strength from each other's struggles and also celebrations.
Well, and it's interesting you're saying the free groups that tend to be the downward spiral of, bad energy and that kind of thing. And I feel like when my business coaching clients are creating their group programs, that is one of the things that really sets a paid group program apart is, first of all, the people that are joining, they are taking it seriously. They're really committed, like they're showing up for themselves and then, for the group. And then also, and I'm sure you've had this experience being the leader of the group, having someone who is their sole responsibility is to facilitate the group experience, then can also create a better outcome because, a lot of these free groups, I think there's value to them. So I'm not like totally poo-pooing the existence of free groups, but the challenge is a lot of them don't have a leader, right? Like they don't have somebody who's in there making sure that everybody's being taken care of, that the information that's getting shared is appropriate and accurate and delivered like in a good way or an effective way. Sorry, I should say not good, but just having that person who's there to really cultivate the experience of the group, I think is really, really valuable for people. And that's one of the reasons why as much value as you can get from a free group, if it's a healthy free group, I think there is so much opportunity to get so much more from a paid group experience. And I know I've experienced that being a member of a variety of paid groups, right? Where whatever you're trying to accomplish, everybody's kind of on the same path. And so I do feel like there's something really unique about the experience that you can create for your clients in that container. And I hope that more people will start to see the value of doing these groups, because I think you can tell me if you've had this experience, but I think everybody assumes that it's better to work with somebody one-on-one and not do a group. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't work with somebody one-on-one, but I think there is that experience of being in a group that actually can't get recreated in the one-on-one container. Is that like reflective of your experience?
Yeah, it really is. And I love that perspective as well on just the paid versus free thing, because I hadn't really consciously thought of it that way in the context of groups before. But I certainly think that's so true, because, there's something that happens when you hand over money. Like, it's an investment, and people are more invested in showing up and taking responsibility, as you said. And that's why I'm actually, over time, have also stopped underselling myself as well. I used to do that a lot. And I don't know what it's like in the US, but in Australia, like naturopaths and nutritionists and stuff notoriously undersell their services. And so that's been something that I have done to also help, because I feel like when it's just a, $100 program, it's much easier for people to be like, oh, whatever, $100. Whereas it's $1,000. And obviously the value of the program needs to reflect that. But if it's $1,000 in comparison, there's just something that shifts in people that really helps them. So that's part of it. And then, as far as like the second part of that question goes, I definitely think that's true. I think what I've found over time with running groups versus doing one-to-ones is that there are benefits in both and there are drawbacks to both. And so what I used to get caught up in, and this might be true for some people in their own businesses, is that I used to think, well, if I do a group program and I'm not working with them one-to-one, I can't get them all the way. And I used to let that stop me. And this is just in the context, I guess, of my experience of nutrition consulting, because the reality is when you're dealing with a health condition, if you're looking at someone's labs one-to-one, it's always going to be more beneficial, in my opinion, to be able to tailor it further to them in that particular way. But then I think if you only ever focus on like the 1% that you can't get 100% better, you'd never help anyone. And so what I've done over time is I've really focused on the benefit of the group and celebrating the fact that I can get someone from, a really bad place to like most of the way healed, and provide them the tools for them to continue that journey. And then also, if they want further one-to-one support, I've built that into the program, or that's where also referring out or finding ways to work with other practitioners that serves both of your businesses can help as well. So I think it's a really common limiting belief, particularly when it comes to health. And I also think that if we step back and look at the big picture, there's always going to be pros and cons. And as long as you're leaving people better than you found them and you're getting them a significant path along, I think that's something to celebrate. Because I know for me, when I reflect back on my health journey, I met and worked with some incredible practitioners, but no single one of them got me the whole way or 100% better. It was the accumulation of all of them coming into my lives at different points in time, along with my action taking, that got me to where I want to be. So I think that I have to always catch myself in that, because it's hard when you've got a big heart and you've felt what it feels like to be really sick, and you just want people to feel well, to not take that on as your sole responsibility. But I think you're doing people a disservice if you do that.
Yeah. Well, and I do feel like with the group program, in a weird way, even though you might not get 100% of the results the way that you could if you had every single intimate detail of everything that's ever happened to them, their labs, their, unique diet choices, their, personal history, all the things that you can get when you're working with them one-on-one. There's something I feel valuable about having them not have as much access to you. This might sound really weird, but it's like, I've noticed, and I've seen this both in my health consulting and my business coaching businesses. So this is, again, just kind of one of those like themes that I've noticed. When somebody has access to you to ask you questions and, get specific instructions, I do feel like it can turn into a situation where they don't feel like they can make their own decisions. And obviously, we can work to empower them more effectively, right? Like not creating codependency with our clients, but it is something that I've definitely noticed where if somebody has a lot more one-on-one access to me, the challenge of them being able to make their own decisions can start to get almost disruptive. And so, with the health journey. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of things that they need to make decisions on and, take action. I mean, food is something we have to make decisions on multiple times a day, right? Like it's not like you get to skip a few days of thinking about your food and lifestyle habits. But I do think it can actually create more self-efficacious people. I'm trying to think of what word would be good there. Just people who they can take in information and apply it to their own circumstances without having to have explicit, like, tell me exactly what to do for me based on your knowledge, and just kind of outsourcing those decisions to someone. So again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't outsource some decisions. I think it's really helpful to have the opportunity to talk to somebody about your individual situation. But I do think that group programs can really train someone how to be able to apply broader information to their own circumstances more effectively.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've certainly fallen into the trap personally and professionally of doing that before, because I think that there is that fine line between enough information that is specific to you to be able to apply it, but then at some point in time, you kind of have to learn to be brave, to make decisions, follow through from them, and then receive the feedback and analyze it for yourself, trusting what your body is sending you, what that message is meaning. And that's where I guess I more am trying to teach people how to interpret the messages that their body is sending them, and then to be able to course correct. So it's kind of like, giving them that education and allowing them to start learning for themselves, like training wheels on a bike. And then at some point in time being like, you know what, you've got this, and you now understand what happens when you eat this food or you don't sleep or whatever it is, and you can course correct instead of being like, oh my gosh, like this just happened, what should I do? And I think in that, what I've done over time as a practitioner is scale back how available I am in terms of time frames, in terms of replying. So when I very first started practicing, oh my God, Laura, I would have my clients would text me every day. They would call me. I would reply to emails within like 8 hours. I was so obsessed with making sure I was fully supporting them when really I wasn't. And these days I use an app called Voxer instead of emails for clients if they've got urgent questions, for my one-to-one clients anyway. But there are only 2 days a week where those questions are going to be answered, no matter how urgent it is, because it almost gives someone a chance to self-soothe as well. Because usually most of the stuff that comes up is more like something's happened, not life-threatening, but just, a self-doubt, or they've fallen off the bandwagon or something like that. And they're like, oh my gosh. And it's almost stepping back and being like, you need to first try to work through it yourself and then come and share with me after that. It's almost encouraging that, so that when eventually they're not working with me, which is the end goal, that they still have that same inner strength, as opposed to it being dependent on having someone else there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so true. And I see this with so many of my business coaching clients where they're like, I want to make my program really valuable, so I'm just going to be super available to answer every single little question that comes up. And it's hard. I mean, even as I'm doing the business coaching, I use Voxer myself for my private clients. And there is that temptation to be like, let me just fix it, right? Or let me solve the problem for you, because you feel like that's what people are paying you for. But it ultimately ends up doing a disservice to them, because like you said, the minute you're not available or you're no longer working together, whatever thing that is preventing them from having access to you, what are they going to do, right? If they haven't ever built that skill to be able to figure things out for themselves. And I know I annoy like a lot of my clients when instead of giving them an answer, I ask them a question. I'm like, What do you think about this? Or like, I ask them a question, like helping them try to figure it out on their own. But they're like, I just want to know the answer. I'm like, yeah, but if I just give you the answer, then like you're not actually getting the full benefit of my service. But it's hard because it's like you want to help people, right? And you want to just provide the information or provide the answer. And sometimes that's what the clients say they want too. So it's this situation where you do have to kind of set some of those boundaries to not only, protect your own well-being as the person who's providing the service, but also allowing them, like you said, to have the opportunity to see if they can figure it out for themselves and to develop that skill. Because it's kind of like, I don't have kids yet, but I can imagine with kids, it's like if you run and like fix everything for a kid and they never have to do anything themselves, like they fall down, you're like, let me go, I'll pick you up. Like, don't they wouldn't even know how to get up off the floor if they didn't have an opportunity to try it themselves. So it is hard though. It is something where, it's like those compassionate boundaries that you set, and obviously being upfront in the beginning and telling them like, here's my policies and all of that. But that's another reason why the group program thing is great, because it's like they never expected to have you providing all the answers. So they kind of come into it with the idea of this is going to be like a joint effort here. It's not just me coming and getting all the information and applying it. It's, me figuring out how to figure out the answer.
Yeah, totally. I think like setting up expectations and boundaries and honoring them, because I think sometimes from a business perspective, what I've seen some of like my colleagues do is they'll say one thing and then do another, then complain when they feel like their boundaries are being crossed. Whereas I think, if, for example, you say you're going to reply on Tuesdays and Thursdays to a Voxer, don't reply on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then be like, oh, why are they messaging me on these days? Because, these aren't the Voxer days. I think it's my responsibility as well to make sure that I'm teaching people how this client-practitioner relationship works, because I think people feel much calmer when they just know what to expect. I think the anxiety comes when you kind of are a bit hot and cold with people.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Well, Natalie, it's been so fun to chat with you about a large variety of topics. I feel like we kind of went all over there, but that was fun. Any last words of wisdom or anything you want to share with our audience before we let them know how they can connect with you?
No, I think, I love the idea of really making sure that when you're approaching any kind of health issue, that mindset and self-responsibility, surrender, compassion is all a huge part of it, because I think sometimes what can happen is we can hyper-focus in on the diet or the supplement or the medication that's going to quote unquote fix us. And I always see that has a glass ceiling on it, and you have to break through that next level and start to look deeper than that. At some point, it might not be your entry point, but at some point, in order to get to that next level and to be able to step into the version of yourself that a lot of people are fearful of, but also craving, and that is the ultimate end goal of how they want to feel. So I just think, a reminder to everyone that no matter what you're going through, don't forget the big picture while you're moving towards wholeness and healing.
Amazing. Well, Natalie, I would love if you want to share where people can find you online. I know you have a podcast, which I'm sure they'll want to listen to. So if you don't mind just sharing where people can connect with you outside of this podcast.
Absolutely. So yes, I do have a podcast. It's called the Holistic Nutritionist Podcast, and you can find it on all your usual podcasting apps. My website is just my name, which is nataliekdouglas.com, and Instagram handle is natalie.k.douglas. That's probably where I am the most. So more than happy to have people come over, connect in my DMs, come and listen to the podcast. I also run 2 programs. One's called Thyroid Rescue. That's a 12-week online program with optional one-to-one support for people with Hashimoto's, an underactive thyroid or Graves' disease or an overactive thyroid. And I also run another 12-week program that also comes with one-to-one support that is called Gut Rescue for people with IBS or similar symptoms. So all that information is on my website, and there's also loads of free resources there as well in terms of checking your thyroid for free, in terms of screening it, and a few other bits and pieces. So I'd love to connect with anyone over on any of those locations. And thank you so much for having me, Laura. It's been such a lovely chat, and definitely a variety, but that's always the way when we're talking all things health and business.
Yeah. Well, like I said a little while ago, I feel like those mindset threads are just everywhere. No matter what you're doing, no matter what you're trying to help people with, it's like the same stuff comes up everywhere. So I just think it's really cool to kind of interweave all the things, because I don't think health is a unique challenge, right? Like any challenge we're facing, I think has a lot of the same stuff that we have to go through. So, well, thank you so much, Natalie. It was so great to have you on the show, and we'll have to have you back on in the future. And thanks to all of you for listening. We will see you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Hey there, Laura here again. Are you a dietitian or nutrition entrepreneur who wants to start or grow an online business? Are you feeling stuck, frustrated, or even downright scared to take the next step towards your dreams of entrepreneurship? Trust me when I say that I've been there before too, and that you are not alone. I've been running my own online business since 2014, and I started my website and blog just about 10 years ago. And over the past decade, I've learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes when it came to creating the multiple six-figure business I now run today. And if there's one thing I've learned since starting my business, it's that you don't have to figure out how to transform your knowledge, expertise, and passion into profitable online courses, digital products, memberships, and coaching services on your own. Now, contrary to popular belief, becoming an in-demand expert in your nutrition business isn't about being egotistical or selfish. It's about having a deep commitment and a burning desire to help others. And if you're not growing your business successfully, there are hundreds and maybe even thousands of people out there who are missing out on the opportunity to get the amazing help and support that you were born to provide. You're here for a purpose, and if helping people improve their health by running an online business is one of your purposes, then I have an exciting opportunity that'll help you build your business even faster and easier than ever before. My world-class business coach, James Wedmore, is going to be opening the door soon for his game-changing online program called Business by Design. This program helps struggling service-based coaches and course creators transform their businesses from the inside out so they can experience the time and financial freedom they desire while having a bigger impact on the world. In this one-of-a-kind program, James shows you exactly what keeps most business owners stuck and struggling and coaches you through the 5 key areas that you need to focus on to overcome whatever is standing in the way of your success. His program also provides a wealth of how-to and instructional content that'll help you execute every important task in your online business, from running a launch successfully to hiring your first VA and everything in between. I consider BBD my business Bible, and I've seen health and nutrition entrepreneurs become wildly successful in their online businesses through applying what James teaches, both from a strategy and a mindset perspective. And these kind of incredible results are possible for you too. Now, if you don't know James Wedmore, he's a self-proclaimed serial entrepreneur who has built multiple 7-figure businesses in multiple niches. He's also one of my favorite coaches and mentors and has helped me completely transform my mindset around business so I could grow my income and my impact while also working less and enjoying life more. The financial and time freedom I've experienced has been life-changing. And I want you to have that experience in your business as well. So if you're ready to start taking charge of your business and your life, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/BBD waitlist. That's BBD WAITLIST. And I'll be sharing more about James's amazing online business program, Business by Design. And if you decide to join BBD under me using one of my affiliate links, you'll also receive bonus coaching from me, plus additional training content covering tools and strategies that are specific to nutrition and dietitian entrepreneurs who want to start, grow, or scale their business to 6 figures and beyond. These bonuses are my gift to you absolutely free when you enroll in Business by Design using my affiliate link. So don't miss your chance to learn the business strategies that have changed my life and the lives of thousands of online entrepreneurs. It's time to step into the role of confident nutrition CEO in your online business. And I can't wait to support you on your journey to becoming the successful nutrition entrepreneur that you were born to be. Go to lauraschoenfeld.com/BBD waitlist to learn more, and I'll see you inside the program.